You are live. Okay, welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Monday night Moshiach Matters class. Because Moshiach matters. It's interesting to note how every single thing that happens in the world is hashgacha pratis. And there are countless prophecies about the fall of the government in Syria and how it will be connected to the redemption. So every day, if you open your eyes and see, we are getting closer and closer to the full and final redemption and the full godless of Melech Mashiach. And whoever is joining these classes will be very happy that they did so, because we are preparing for Mashiach by learning about Mashiach. And let's get started. So we are in Parshas Vayishlach. The Sikh was originally given in Tes Zion on the 16th of Kislev in Tafshin Nun base, which puts us 33 years ago. A very powerful number if you're into Freemasonry. Okay. Welcome. And let's get cracking. Aleph. העניינים המיוחדים ליום שבת קודש זה. תחילה עשו ערב שבת, שבו נעשה אחידה ליום שבת. כלומר זו, מי שטרח לערב שבת, יכול בשבת. Okay. So we see there's a very special thing coming about this Shabbat coming up. In general for us as well, but specifically in the Shabbat that the Rabbi mentioned when the Sicha was given. And it's known, there's a saying that if you eat from the food, if you taste from the food of Erev Shabbat, it's like you participated in the Shabbat early. It's an Indian, it's a thing to taste from the Shabbat food prior to Shabbat. So the Sicha was given, as we said, and the Rabbi said Erev Shabbat that year is on the 15th of Kislev. When the moon is at its state of fullness. And as we have learned recently, especially in 2 weeks ago, Parshas told us the significance of the waxing and waning of the moon and how it's connected to our connection to Hashem, the revealed connection, that's what we call Gilui, and the concealed connection, which is Atzmos, or the Metzias, or the essence. And on the 15th of the month, the moon is at its state of fullness. B'shleimus Chodesh Kislev, and therefore the month of Kislev is at its state of fullness. Siyayima Hagamar Motzi Shabbat Shenimsach Ad Yom Hashlishi B'Shavua Yom Yotes Kislev. And the Shabbat that the Rebbe is mentioning is so special because it is the Shabbat that benches, that blesses Yotes Kislev. And Yotes Kislev is the day of redemption, we know. Shel Rabbeinu Hazakin, Chag HaHagim, Rosh Hashanah, the Torah Chassidus. This is what's happening, though. This is the 19th of Kislev is referred to as the Hag HaGeula, the festival of redemption. It's the day that the first Rebbe was released from prison for spreading Judaism. And it's known as the Rosh Hashanah of the Torah of Chassidus, because it's really the beginning process of when the decree was removed from above, when all the green light, so to speak, came from above of spreading out the teachings of Chassidus, and everything was multiplied in a very, very abundant fashion. It's really called the Festival of Redemption. Let's see here. What is today? Oh, wait a minute. Because we want to say... So before we continue any further, we want to say a special l'chaim for the birthday of the Mittler Rebbe. Today was the birth and the passing of the second Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber of Lubavitch. So Rav Dov Ber ben Rav Shner Zalman, his neshama should have an aliyah, and the ultimate aliyah back to a physical body. And in his merit, we should have the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, as we learned extensively in last week. With Sicha, the significance of the fact that today, the 9th of Kislev, is the day that both the Mittler Rebbe was born and was removed from this world. So happy birthday to him. And anyways, so Yotes Kislev is the festival of redemption, and it's also the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, of the Torah of Chassidus. And this is the Shabbat that benches, that blesses that upcoming Haga'ul, that Hag of Hagu, the festival, the 19th of Kislev. Okay. Omar lemechadaz b'kavir zoom ima the kavir the yom yotes Kislev b'pam rishayna. K'divrei Rabbeinu Hazaken kam rachas lo yidua shegulu lach t'chaisim b'yom yotes Kislev gam gimel shahofla bo kitayv. So the Rebbe said what's very unique in this year, the year that the Rebbe gave the Sikha 33 years ago, was that Yud Tes Kislev fell out on Yom HaShlishi, the third day of the week, which was also the original day of the Yud Tes Kislev, which fell out on the third day of the week, which we say is doubled over for good. Because we know that third day is connected to Tiferet, number 3, which is a balancing of the first two. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So the number 3 is always a balancing number, and it's always a number that is remembered for double good. And it's known that when the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, by the way, when they were in prison, both for spreading Judaism, they both got redeemed while they were reciting Tehillim number 55. And the specific verse of Palav Bashalom Benafshi, that my soul was redeemed in peace. And it happened to be that it's Hashgacha Pratis, when they were reciting this verse, is when they were redeemed from prison. Mamila Shachag Shabbos Kodesh Lifnei Yud Tes Zayin Kislev Erev Shabbos Yud Tes Vav Kislev. So again, the Rebbe gave the Sikh originally on Erev Shabbos, which was the 15th of Kislev, and the 16th of Kislev on Shabbat, and then it was blessing the upcoming Yud Tes Kislev. Yud Tes Kislev in our calendar, I believe, is on Friday. It is, yes, correct, a week from this Friday. But the Geula of the Mittler Rebbe of Tes Kislev is tomorrow night, and also on Wednesday, tomorrow night and Wednesday. Okay. The Rebbe says every little detail in our lives are guided by God. Yeah, but Tesvav Kislev Shabbat Kiyom Simacha B'Shlemos Kilkam. So the Rebbe said there is Hashgacha Pratis. There's a deep connection to the fact that on the 19th of Kislev, the power to bless the 19th of Kislev happened to be on Shabbat that year, and on the 15th day of the month, and therefore 15th is the day of the completion of the month of Kislev. As we learned, the 15th is the day the moon is complete, and every month it's called the completion of that month. And in that particular year, it fell out on Shabbat, so the Rebbe is saying there's a deep significance to that, which we will discuss. Base. So first of all, we have to explain that Yud Tes Kislev is a holiday that is unlike any other holidays. It's funny because all the time in the center, every time I bring, I always start by saying, today is a very special day in the Hasidic and Hebrew calendar. And it's kind of a joke because I always say it, but the truth is it's always true. Every day is unique, especially festivals of connected to Rebbeim. But the Yud Tes Kislev happens to be unique in and of itself. So let's talk about some of the other festivals we celebrate. Pesach v'Sukkot. Nikvo b'yom chamisha esar b'chodesh. Both Pesach and Passover and Sukkot fall out on the 15th of the month, when the moon is at its state of completion. B'Shavuos noisef l'kach hakasuv lo tzila chag hazeh v'kama yamim l'chodesh rak b'chamisha lo'emer. Hari kavios v'yamei hachodesh hi v'chitzvi arishon shel hachodesh. Chodesh l'Havana. So we see that the other festivals, the majority of the other festivals, they fall out on the 15th of the month, when the moon is at its state of fullness. But we see on Yud Tes Kislev, it's already past the 15th of the month, where the moon is no longer increasing, it's no longer waxing, it's waning, it's decreasing. And that's not normal. Normally, you see the festivals are coming at the beginning of the month when the moon is increasing, or specifically on the 15th of the month, like Pesach and Sukkot, where the moon is at its full point. But now that the moon is traveling to its shrinking, when it's waning on Yud Tes Kislev, that's what makes it unique, one aspect of it. And we're going to go into that. But the Rebbe just said, not only does Yud Tes Kislev call out on the 15th of the month, like a lot of other festivals when the moon is at state of completion, but on the contrary, it falls out on the day of the month of the 19th of the month, where the moon is already in the process of shrinking. And what other holiday falls out in the latter part of the month? Hanukkah. We see the same concept. Hanukkah starts on the 25th of Kislev, and it begins this process. We see that Hanukkah is already at the point, and in the midst of Hanukkah, where the moon is completely concealed when it goes to the very end of the month. So there's something connected, as we learned in last week's parsha, last week's sikha at length, between the holidays. I don't know, I'm gibberish tonight. The holidays of Yud Tes Kislev and Hanukkah. And one of these aspects is that they occur in the latter half of the month, which is unique. Gimel. So let's talk about it. First of all, we have to discuss a little bit about the diminishing of the moon in the second half of the month, and how the Jewish people are likened to the moon. First of all, שכיוון שחצבה הראשון של חודש מויסף וחולך אור לבנה מיום ליום, וחצבה השני של חודש פוחס והילך אור לבנה מיום ליום. In the beginning of the month, we know that the moon is increasing day by day and becoming more visible. In the latter half of the month, we know the opposite. The moon is shrinking, it's waning, becoming less visible. היה צריך להסתכל גם המניין לבנה באופן שחצבה הראשון של חודש ימי מניין וימים מויסף וחולך, וחצבי השני של חודש יהיה מניין ימים פסח והילך. So the Rebbe asked the question, if in fact the moon is reaching its full state in the 15th of the month and it's reached its state of completion, why don't we start counting down? In other words, why is there a counting every month not following the sequence of the moon? In fact, we know one of the reasons that the Jewish calendar is primarily based on the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar, although there are corrections made for the solar calendar as well. One of the reasons being, of course, the Jewish people are likened to the moon. So when we reach the completion at the 15th of the month and the moon is full, when it gets to the 16th and the moon starts waning, the Rebbe says, why don't we start counting back down? Right? We should count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 better to get to 15. And instead of 16 up to 29 or 30, why are we counting higher when the moon's shrinking? We should get to 15 and then go back down again, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, all the way down to 0, and go up 1 through 15 and back from 15 down to 1. That's how the counting should be in the monthly basis, since it is following the cycle of the moon. But the Rebbe says, not only are we not reversing the order of counting after the 15th of the month, מספר אחד יויסר במספר תזוו, ומניין היום של אחאב. וי"ז בייס מספרים יויסר מספר תזוו, וכל הילה. ועד המניין היום האחרון של חודש, כמה וכמה מספרים יויסר מספר תזוו. So the Rebbe is just emphasizing that same point again. Zoit v'oit, and furthermore, מלבד המספר, המספר דימים החודש מודגש לעילוי גם בהגמטריה בחמרי זיו שבה לדוגמה מספר י"ז בגמטריה טויב Now the Rebbe is going to go into the gematrias of the latter days of the month, just to add on to this, the fact that we're increasing in numbers. We know the gematria of 17 is tov, or good. The gematria of Yud Ches is chai, or life. And then we have the number 19, which is batov, with good, or in good. Then the number 20, which is two yuds in the state of filling, double yud. The number 21, ich toiv Yisrael, how good is the Jewish people. The number 22, which is bach rech Yisrael, to bless the Jewish people. The number 23, which is gematria de tov, which is $1 in front of the tov, gematria. And then we have the number 24, Shamti kedechad shemaisecha, and then 25, chol terechoz b'nei Yisrael, and 26 is the name of Havaya, and 27, gematria zach, which is to be pure or purified. 28 is gematria koach, or power. 29, imei chodesh shlishi chodesh malach, and then it becomes full. Tam darvar kevan shishnoi b'tzivu harav nitinas koach ma'alin b'kodesh. אין מורידים שהם תקפו וכל ימי החודש גם לאחרי מילא ושלמות לבנה מיום ליום חילק ונספו עוד יויסר. על פי זה צריך להבין תוכן העניין דמיות הבנה. So the Rebbe says, what's going on? Since that we're counting, let me finish the paragraph. בחץ והשני שהחודש לאחרי המילא והשלמות הלוחס ומסתמאתיס. מיום ליום שלכל אחרי זה ההפך וכל מילה בקדושה. אין מורידים. So hold on a second. Ein Moradim, excuse me. Since it appears that things are going higher after the 15th and the 16th, and we are counting higher, and not only that, we see the Rebbe points out the gematrias of these higher numbers have very powerful connections to what they mean that they're associated with. So if that's the case, then why doesn't the moon just get bigger? The Rebbe is saying, like, if we're counting higher and higher, and the gematrias are getting more significant, then let the moon keep getting bigger all the way to the 30th or the 29th. And then when it's at a state of fullness, let it do a reset. So something's off again, the Rebbe is pointing out in a different direction this time with the counting of the days in the month and the cycles of the waxing and waning of the moon. Dalit, which is interesting because this is very close to what we spoke about 2 parshas ago and told us about the Jewish people being renewed like the moon. Vav. So let's explain further. The sun and the moon are generally representing these 2 acts of giving and receiving, or a giver and a receiver. What's called in Chassidus as a makabel and a mashpia. One who's giving over and the one who's receiving what they're giving over, usually connected to Torah, knowledge. In fact, it's one of the most common mushals, examples given in probably all of Chassidus, is the mashpia of a Rav and a Talmud, of a teacher and a student, and how the teacher has to lower the content of what he's talking about in such a way that the student can accept it, receive it. And it's the whole idea of lights and vessels, that we have to have a proper vessel to receive the blessings that God is giving us. And the bigger blessing we want, the more vessel we have to contain it. So Kabbalah and Chassidut work a lot on these concepts of orot and kelim, or orot meaning the giver and kelim meaning the receiver. It's the same thing we see in a relationship. A man's parnassah is connected to his wife. She is the vessel to receive that, and that's she's known as the physical aspect. In fact, the Gemara says, don't quote me, it's written in the Gemara, but that when it comes to matters of material things, you should listen to your wife, but not matters in spiritual things, because the man is likened more to the spiritual energy, which is the giving energy of the light, and the woman to the receiving energy or the vessel. And together, Am Yisrael represent the feminine aspect of God. We're the receiver of God's energy, and God is the giver. Hence, he's likened to the sun, or what we call the sphere of Zah, and we're likened to the moon, or the sphere of Malchus. And then each one of us, of course, on our own, has to be a receiver and a giver. So the more we want from God, the more we need to give to others. That's how it works, right? You want to make more money, give more tzedakah. Some people say, "Oh, give me money and then I'll give more tzedakah." But sometimes you gotta be the impetus. You gotta be the derusa de latata. You have to give, even if you can't afford or don't have, and then in return it forces God's hand, so to speak, to give you more. So this idea of giving and receiving is a very common theme in Chassidus. And let's continue with, of course, the sun representing the giver and the moon as the receiver. The Kabbalah's oro machama, because the moon receives its light from the sun. And this, in a way that this influence begins and is receiving only through a little bit of light. This is the molad of the moon, the birth of the moon, Nakuda Bilvad, in the beginning of every single Hebrew month. When the moon is, so to speak, born, you only see a little sliver of the moon, tiny drop. And day by day, as the moon increases, it's receiving more and more light from the sun. Until the 15th of the month, where the discus, the actual circumference of the moon is at its fullest state. And then we see the light of the moon is, so to speak, equivalent to the light of the sun, meaning they're both at a full capacity. Right? The sun doesn't wax and wane. The sun's it may be hidden behind clouds at times, but it's always in its full thing. There's no, unless you have an eclipse, there's no partial sun. Even though the moon is at its state of fullness on the 15th of the month, it's still a receiver. And it's not at the ultimate completion, the moon, like it is like the sun, because the sun is not conditioned upon anything else to receive its light. Whereas the moon is, it gets it from the sun. And it says in the future to come, the moon will once again be full like the sun. And there will be two great luminaries. And the moon will, so to speak, be its own luminary, meaning the Jewish people will be their own givers, so to speak, and the nations of the world will take on the role of the Makabel. And we will no longer need, it's hard to say this properly, it's not that we will no longer need God. Of course, we still need God because he's the giver of all, but that we will reach a state of completion in our being of who we are and have the capacity to give in the fullest capacity. So there is to say that this concept of the light of the moon receiving from the sun, so in order to reach the state of what we say is that the sun and the moon will once again be two great luminaries, and the moon will return to its state of fullness. In order for the moon to be able to have that energy source independent, so to speak, of the sun, it must receive it from somewhere else. And then what's going to happen is, in order for the sun and the moon to both be in an equal setting, you have to have a higher energy that is going to be revealed, giving to both of them. And that is known as Keter. Keter, or the crown, which is the highest of all the Sphirot. And it's representing God's kingship and Melech HaMashiach's kingship above and below. And the completion of the essence of God being revealed in such a high capacity that will become palatable. In other words, God will no longer be concealed or hidden. This level of God, this Keter, or this crown energy, will be one tremendous great energy source for everything. And this completion is going to be expressed through the relationship between the moon and the sun in the second half of the month, as we're going to explain, not in the first half. So in other words, it's more when the moon is waning and not waxing, when it's decreasing. Hey, Bior Devarim. So let's explain now. Excuse me. יום פסח והילך אור לבנה הוא מפני שבחצבי הראשון של החודש לא יכעס ויתרחקס הלבן המחמה. And again, we discussed this at length 2 sikhs ago in Parshas Toldos. And it says like this. In the first half of the month, the reason that the moon is waxing and getting bigger is because it's going further away from the sun. That's why it's becoming more visible, because it's traveling away. And when it's traveling away, you start to see it better. When it's closer, you don't see it. So the moon's visibility is showing that it's further away from the sun, not that it's closer. And every day as the moon travels further and further away from the sun, it becomes bigger and bigger in its visibility. And the second half of the month, when the moon appears to be shrinking, what is happening is it's getting closer and closer to the sun. Because on the 15th of the month, it's the furthest away from the sun. You see it in its best. But it's not until the end of the month that it's coming back around and getting closer to the sun again. So as the light gets smaller, it's getting closer to its source. And the reason for this is connected to the relationship between the mishpia, or the giver, which is the sun, and the makabel, or the receiver, which is the moon. In such a way that when the receiver is getting closer and closer to the giver is no longer really capable of shining or giving to the receiver. But when he's further away is when he's more capacity to give, right? So there's many things we can look at like this. Just look at a common relationship of you're hugging your wife, you're embracing her, you're hugging a good friend, whatever the case may be. You're together, you don't see the person. As you separate further away, they become more visible. And when they're further away, they become more visible. So they're becoming further away from you. So it's the same idea. If you have a Rav and a Talmud, a Torah scholar and a student, the more the student becomes knowledgeable, and sometimes it happens that the student becomes more knowledgeable than the Rav, that the Talmud's Torah knowledge surpasses his teacher. That's what every teacher wants. Every teacher wants his students to become higher than himself. So the closer that Rav gets to that student, and the more he increases his knowledge, he has less to give, because he's already getting all of that knowledge, right? So the closer you get to something, the less the capacity to shine onto it, meaning you're becoming closer and closer to that entity, versus when it's further away, the capacity to shine towards that entity or to give towards it is increasing. So there's the say, when the moon is getting closer to the sun in the second half of the month, which is indicative by the fact that the moon is getting smaller, it's getting closer to the very essence of the sun, which is higher than what we call Gilui, than its revelation, right? We talk to express ourselves, but our language can never really pinpoint how we feel, right? Like if you're ever in an emotional situation, sometimes it's hard to find words to really put to it. So the words are what we call a lavush, or garments. They're a vehicle for us to express ourselves, but it's not showing who we truly are, right? When you're really connected to a person, you can feel them without them saying a word, just being in their presence. So that feeling, that oneness, that closeness of that person is, in fact, a result of you don't see it as much, right? Going back to the hug example, when you're in an embrace, you can't see the person because you're close to them. And when you're going further away, you could see them more. It becomes more revealed relationship, but they're further away. So when the moon is getting closer to the sun, what's happening is its light is diminishing, but its true essence is increasing. And ultimately, it's a common theme I speak about a lot in Fabring, is that it's a basic fundament of any type of therapy or healing. You can't give what you don't have, right? So if you're trying to be an influence on another, and you're trying to talk to them about I don't know, whatever it may be, but you don't have that in yourself, right? Like, you can't be merciful towards another if you're self-judging yourself all the time. You can in words, but it's not real. People sense. So the key ultimately is to get close as you can to your essence, which is God. And the closer you get to God in your essence, the more equipped you are to express that and for it to become revealed. But if you try to reveal something, but there's nothing in its core, as they say in Texas, all hat, no cattle, right? It's you sense it's not real. It's like people are just spitting hot air, but there's nothing, no real content behind them. So the goal is you want to get close as possible to your core, to your essence. People are drawn to people who are real, who are authentic, who are not putting on a show, who are not pretending to act like someone that they're not, right? We've all seen these fake people. They suck. No one wants to be around these people, like they're pretending like they're. You feel it's crappy, it's people, and it's a crazy thing because throughout our lives we've all attempted to act like and be like others because we want to fit in, but that's not how you fit in. You fit in by being yourself and by being real, and people respect people who are connected to their essence, who are real. And so the idea is the closer we get to our essence, we become closer to God. We become closer to who we really are. And then when we reveal, when we speak, when we guide others, when we're as a friend, as a mashpia, whatever the case may be, it's authentic, it's real. So that's the idea. So what the idea is, when it's getting closer and the light is shrinking, it's becoming closer to its essence. And the idea is for the sun and the moon to get to these revealed aspects, to connect to because the sun is likened to God, but it is a lower level of God. It's not his essence, it's one of his names. The name Havaya, which is a very high level, but still, the goal is connect to the essence of God himself, which is a theme we've been learning a lot about recently. So let's continue on insight. Because when you see the light being revealed, it's not its essence. It's called what we call a gilui, or an expression, right? What's more powerful, the rays of the sun or the sun? The sun, of course. The rays of the sun or how the sun is, so to speak, expressing itself. But the essence of the sun is where its real heat is, where its real power comes from. So the Rebbe said it's a very nuanced thing, because in the second half of the month, when the moon is getting smaller and smaller in its light, what's happening is it's getting closer and closer to its essence, which is higher than its light. And this is how the moon becomes closer to the sun, with the ultimate goal of Keter Echad Lishneim, the crown that encompasses both of them, the very essence of God that is higher than physical and spiritual, that's higher than a giver and a receiver. This is where we want to aspire to as Yidden, as to being lights upon the nations. That's our job, that's our mission in this world, that we should be a light, a luminary to the nations. But to be a proper luminary, to really shine, you have to be connected to yourself. In other words, you got to fix your own crap. You can't go around lecturing people about how wonderful God is, and then you're angry and you're pissed, and you're fighting with your wife, and you're fighting with your boss, and you're angry at the world, and you're like, but you have to understand, God is the truth. This is what you want to do, and they see you and they're like, this guy's an asshole. I don't want anything to do with that. It's not just connected to God; it's in any capacity. Right? It's like you're not going to go to a personal trainer who's telling you how to get in shape, who's fat and overweight. It doesn't make sense. So if we're out here, with one of these and one of these on our head, and we're trying to sell Judaism, the greatest way we could sell Judaism is being the greatest example of a Jew we can be. We have to be sincere with ourselves, and we have to tap into this energy. And this is the godly energy of the essence. And the only way to connect to your essence is to connect to your creator who creates us. And the closer you get to your creator, the closer you get to your essence, the more you connect to your crown, the Keter. And then what happens is the goal is to reach a state where it's no longer about there's God and there's me, there's giving and there's receiving, and like I'm taking on different roles, and it's everything's God. In other words, you're tapped into an energy where it's in a total state of oneness with Hashem. And you're not thinking about giving and receiving. It's just flow. The energy is coming in, it's going out. It's the total state of flow, and everything is going, and it's working good. And this is when you tap into the Keter energy, the energy of Mashiach. And that's the Nakuda the Rebbe is trying to get us to. Okay, but let me go even deeper. In general, the essence is concealed and the light is revealed. Yep, self-delusion is a very powerful thing. And it's all connected to our relationship to others. That since it's not able to receive from the essence, only able to get a radiation and illumination of it, right? You can't take the light directly from the sun, you'll burn. You got to get the light from the rays of the sun. So what appears is the light appears to be the good thing, but the light is really just a ha'ara. It's not the essence of something. The essence is concealed and considers dark. But the truth of the matter is, it's really the opposite. That the light is really dark regarding the essence, and the essence is really like the light. In other words, I don't want to get too far off topic. It's not off topic, but too deep into this because we have limited time here, right? But you have this concept of Yesh Ma'ayin, that God creates something from nothing. But then that God is the something, right? And that that God is the nothing, and that we are the something, nothing from something. Something from nothing, excuse me. But the highest is to go that God becomes Yesh Amiti, and we become the nothing. That God is the true existence, and we are the true non-existence. In other words, the goal is to go to a higher awareness, a higher state of reality, where the Alter Rebbe talks about it in Tanya, and he says, what is your purpose in being here? Is it Yud He or Vav He? Is it the lower or the upper? If your purpose is the upper, which is all of our purpose in Yud He, to go to the essence of God, we'll understand that every single test we're going through in our lives, and all the darkness and challenges, are God holding us like this, out of love, and telling us, I got you. I know it's dark outside, I know it looks crappy, but it's because you're connected to my essence right now, and I'm just testing you to bring you closer. If the Rebbe says, if you look at Yud Aleph in the Tanya, it's the Haskell Kabina. It's a very, very powerful aspect of the Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe says, listen, if you're here for yourself, for your bank, for your own family, for anything connected to you, it's better you didn't come into the world, because then your whole value system is based on the lower connection of God, which is the Vav He, which is when it's light out, everything's wonderful. When it's dark out, everything's horrible. When it's really the opposite. The darkness is when we're connected to the essence. Yud Hey is a much higher level. Ideally, we want to get to a state of Mashiach consciousness, where the Rebbe is trying to bring us to in the Sichos, that we get connected to the Yud Hey. That's what it says in the Chaskil Chabina. And in the darkness, you realize that it's really just a game, and that God is right there with you. And you believe with such strength and faith that this dark is really light and it's really good, that the dark will become light. And the very essence, which is normally concealed, becomes revealed. This is a Mashiach energy. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, and from this we can understand it's necessary to diminish the light in order to get close to the essence. And rather, it's not like the time that we see that it's in the boundaries of the existence and of itself. And it's not able to receive from the essence. Sometimes I speak too soon. Exactly what I just finished saying. Excuse me. And the goal is that you become so one with the Mashpia, that you're so in tune with the godly energy that's coming to you, that it's no longer this is God and this is me, and where do I fit in? How much do I do? How much does God do? You just reach a total state of oneness, and then you can work in such a way that you're connected, and you're no longer, your actions are no longer separated, so to speak, from who you are. In other words, every single aspect of your life is a complete reflection of your true identity in its core, when you're connected to God at a state of oneness. And that's the goal. The Rebbe says numerous times in all these sikhs that the Jewish people and God are literally one, like in the most simplest sense, not in warm, fuzzy words, like literally. And by the way, that's the underlying theme of all of these sikhs of Nun Alef the base, that the Rebbe is week in and week out. And Baruch Hashem, I've been zoichet to learn these sikhs. I think I'm going on my 18th or 19th year. And every single time, it's a game changer. It just goes deeper and deeper levels. And it's all, these sikhs, I've said it 100 times, I'll say it 100 more times. This is the mamutza. This is the connection between the Torah we have now and the Torah of Mashiach. It's the keter. It's the energy transfer to the higher states of consciousness and awareness. And the Rebbe is week after week training us and bringing our consciousness out of exile and into Geula, into the realization that physical, spiritual, God, Jewish people, it's all merging into one, into a complete state of oneness. And now we can understand that when the moon is shrinking in the second half of the month, it's only the light that is decreasing. And the only reason the light is decreasing is because it's getting closer to the essence of the core of who it is. And it's above light. It's higher than light. And the Rebbe said, and that is why we keep counting higher. Even though when we get to that midpoint of the month, the moon is shrinking, because we're counting higher, and we're getting to higher, deeper states of gematria, because we're getting closer to our essence. And that's what happens in the second half of the month. And that's what's really occurring, is that in our life, God waxes and wanes with us as the moon. And there's times where he's revealed and we see him very clearly, but it's a lower level of connection. When we don't see him and he's concealed, he's giving us a big hug like this, and he's holding on to us. And we're connected to his essence. It's a much higher level. In fact, it's the whole reason we came into this world. But Yesh Lamar, there is to say, and there's something unique in the completion of the moon and the waning of the moon in the second half of the month, for the month of Kislev, The month of Kislev is the third of the winter months. Generally speaking, according to Kabbalah, sometimes we split up the Hebrew calendar just in two, summer and winter. Basically, summer months running from Nisan to Elul, and the winter months starting from Tishrei to Adar. So Chodesh Kislev, the month of Kislev, is the third month in the winter months. HaMekivan, the Chodesh Yishem, Chodesh HaKaitz, the Chodesh, the Matan Torah, and the third month of the summer month is the month of Sivan, where we receive the Torah. The Dugmas HaChodesh HaKislev, Chodesh, the Matan Torah, HaTorah Chasidus. And we know in the month of Kislev, the third winter month, we also receive the Torah. We receive the Torah of Chasidus on Yotes Kislev, Shu Rosh Hashanah, the Matan Torah. The Torah is Chasidus. This is considered the Rosh Hashanah of the Torah of Chasidus. In Bezak Yodua Shema'an Torah hu Yoim HaChanutza the Hatona Nisir HaKadosh Baruch Hu Knesset Yisrael. And it's known that the whole concept of receiving the Torah it's likened to a wedding day between the Jewish people and God. Because the Torah is the connector, the bridge that connects an infinite God to a finite human being. And the same thing with Yotes Kislev, the Torah of Chassidus. Not only is it the bridge connecting us to God, it's connecting us to the deeper, innermost aspects of God. There are people who learn halacha and Gemara and nigla their whole life, and there's zero God present in their life. They keep mitzvot, they keep kosher, they keep Shabbos for sure, but they don't have God in their essence. They're not flowing with godly energy, because if you don't learn Chassidus, and the Rebbe said Chassidus is the most important thing to learn right now, more than anything. In fact, when Mashiach comes, every Jew is going to know the entire Shulchan Aruch and the whole Gemara by heart. We're going to know intuitively exactly what halachas to keep, everything. But Chassidus is infinite. It goes on forever because God's infinite. And the Rebbe explains the deeper you go into the Torah, the deeper you go into yourself, and the deeper you go into your connection with God. That's why it's so important. And that's why learning Chassidus as the Torah of Chassidut, this is how we connect to the essence of God, to the soul, so to speak, of the Torah. And as we said earlier, generally speaking, God is considered the Mishpia, or the giver, and the Jewish people and the Makabel, or the receiver. But the Rebbe said the ultimate expression of this relationship is when God and the Jewish people achieve a state of oneness. Mamash, so to speak. Obviously, we can't become God, but the oneness of the godly soul inside of us. And then we will no longer, it's this mind, the stuff that the Rebbe lays out in the Sichas is mind-altering, because there's nobody, not the biggest Makublim in the history of the world, speaking about the level that the Rebbe is speaking about in the Sichas, where it says ultimately what's going to happen is we're not going to be in a Makabel Mishpia relationship with God, because we're going to be one with God. Can't understand what that means. Rumaz gam b'chodesh hashlishi ki yadu hashlishi mora'ah hachibur v'yichad le'el yoin v'tachton. And we say the number 3, the third month, is connected to the unification of the one, the above, and the 2, the below, into one. Al pizeh yesh l'mar she'mevi miloi hashlimas v'levanat v'yutes v'yukes chodesh hashlishi. And therefore we see the completion of the moon on the 15th of the month of the third month of Kislev, Chodesh the Matan Torah, the month of the giving of the Torah of Chassidus, Yom Chasuna, the marriage month, the wedding between the Jewish people and God. And we will reach that ultimate state of oneness when the moon, which is likened to the Jewish people, and the sun, which is likened to God, receive the state of oneness. Again, and then it will be revealed that the Jewish people and God are truly one. we're spitting these words out like having a conversation. But if you pause and think about it, it's a tremendously profound and deep concept. Zion will only make yoiser and even deeper. Mudgash enin zeh l'kiyam sicha b'shlemus the chodesh kislev yoiser mahachodesh tivan. The Rebbe says, and now the Rebbe is going to go out and say a very bold thing, that the emphasis of the fulfillment of the moon on the third winter month of Kislev is even more than the third summer month of Sivan. So the Rebbe is saying, again, a very mind-boggling, controversial statement, that in a way, Chassidus and the Torah of Chassidus and Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus is higher than Matan Torah. That when the Alter Rebbe brought Chassidus, starting with the Tanya, and there's thousands and thousands and tens and thousands of sichos in my Marim written from all seven of Rabbeim, expounding on these concepts, that this is even a higher Indian, because ultimately the Torah teaches you how to act like a Jew and to live like a Jew. Very important. But Chassidus is the vehicle to achieve a state of oneness with God, which is the highest. In other words, it's above actions. Zayin. But I already said that. Because the summer months, they're hot, they're warm, hayamim aruchim, halaylos, and the days are longer and the nights are shorter. Unlike now, and the winter it's cold. And we have longer nights and shorter days. I remember there's a whole lot of noise a few years ago about they were going to abolish daylight savings time, and it went up to and it never, I don't know what happened. Doesn't seem like anything ever happened then. Eretz HaKodesh. And we see this concept is focused the most in the land of Israel. For beginner translated Chassidus Sfarim. These are excellent. The Hasidic Heritage series. There's you could buy the whole series of them in Kihot. They have it's Hebrew and English. There's 30, 35 of them now. They're excellent. They take important Maimarim and their Hebrew and English translations. You've probably seen them before, with all the footnotes, and they're explaining in detail what's going on. And they're designed for beginners, but they can be used by advanced people as well. But they explain all the concepts, and they did an excellent job of translating it into deep Hasidic concepts into English. I recommend using those. Okay. The summer months are more connected to the revealing of the sun, which is Havaya, which is the concept of above to below, which is when things are revealed. It's not the case with the winter months when it's cold, and the main work is from us, from below to above. In other words, from the Yidden up to Hashem. And therefore we see the completion of the month of the 15th on the third month of the winter months. Then the main Indian is the revealing of the son of Havaya. We see in the summer months, it's more of a clear connection between the Mashpia and the Makabel. it's warm, you see the more open energy, so to speak, from above, from God. That's not the case with the winter months, where the main service is connected to us, where God is more concealed, and we have to work harder to reveal it. And this is the ultimate marriage. Where you don't see God or the giver in an open way and the receiver separate. But because you have this darkness, when the days are shorter and the nights are longer, it's cold, you don't see this open relationship. It more emphasizes this connection to the essence where God and the Jewish people are one. It's just a lot of deep concepts in this sikha, and just if you want to ruminate on one thing, just think about this idea that in our lives, when things are so-called good, it's God's further away from us. When it's dark and we don't see Him, He's holding us tightly. We shouldn't go through these tests. It should be enough, and we should reach this level of keter. And the level of keter, as the Rebbe is saying, is you get the benefit of both. You have God holding you tightly, but you can still see. It's because your essence is then revealed. But you have to connect to your essence in order for that to take place. And that's the whole idea of keter. That's the whole idea of Moshiach, of Geula. Ches. We also see this hinted in the month of Kislev in its name. Again, we talked about this earlier in Parshas Toldos, but let's go through it again. Kislev comes from two words together, kis for lev. Kis is from Lashon kisui, which means helam or concealed. Lev is the gematria of 36, which is the same as Ela, which is revealed of 6 times 6. There's a full revelation of the emotional sphirot. And when you combine both the concealing and the revealing together, this is Kislev. This is indicative of the coming together of concealing and revealing. And then the very essence, so we just spoke about, the hug, the oneness, it's still light. You're connected to your source, but it's no longer dark. It's God says, okay, you passed the test, you got it. I'm here now. You see me, I'm with you. You'll never feel like you're separate from me again, because you're connected to your essence. And that's a lot of digging. A lot of digging deep inside and removing layers and layers and layers. And there's a lot of dirt in there. And there's a lot of crap that's been built up. And if we don't plow through it, it'll eat us alive. And we'll never be able to get to this level of really reaching the state of flow that we're talking about. And the Rebbe is emphasizing this point like crazy in the Sikha. And then the goal is that there's no longer a clear giver and receiver relationship, but literally a total state of oneness. And we also see this, of course, but not only Yud Tes Kislev, but with Hanukkah. We see the same thing with Hanukkah. As we're lighting the candles, day by day, the moon's shrinking, and it's less light. But as we said earlier, the moon is decreasing. It's not because it's decreasing. It's because its light is decreasing. And what's happening is it's getting closer to its essence, which is above its light. But when it's being revealed, it appears to be that it's getting smaller. And as we increase in the lights of Hanukkah, we're getting closer and closer to the essence, to the state of oneness. That's what Chassidus is. That's what oil. That's why Chassidus is the oil of the Torah. It's the level that is the closest to the very essence of God. Test. Al Pize Yesh Lebar Hatam Hakavios the Rosh Hashanah the Torah's Chasidus Hag HaChagim Who La'achin Miloi Hashlim Havana. And now we're going to talk about a little bit further how the ultimate festival of Chassidut Hag HaGeula Yud Tes Kislev takes place after the 15th of the month when the moon is already waning and shrinking, as we've been speaking about. That Chassidus is the beginning of the revealing of the Torah of Mashiach, as we were saying previously. So if the Alter Rebbe's Tanya is the beginning of the revealing of the Torah of Mashiach, Alachas Kama Vakama, the Rebbe's Mashiach Torah of Nun Aleph Nun Beis, the most recent Chassidus we have today, is the closest thing we have to the Torah of Mashiach we have today. Torah Chadash Mitzi Tetzi, which will be a whole new Torah that's going to come out from God. And it's not going to be compared at all to the Torah we already got. Torah Shadam the Mod Ha'olam Hazeh Hevel Ifen Torah Mashiach. Says the Torah that we learn now is Hevel, is literally like air. It's like nothing compared to what the Torah Mashiach is going to be like. How do you like them apples? And the unique thing of the days of Mashiach, as they're going to be compared to the actual wedding, which took place in the giving of the Torah, Kedisa but Midrash, Masha the Melech Shekesh, Isha V'Kisar Lo Mutanois Mu'atas. Kivan Shabo the Kachas Kesal Lo Matanos Rebois Mukava'al. Kach ha'aylam hu orisin hayu. Shenamar Grishi Sicha Lilo Ilam V'Lo Masar Lehem Ela Lahavana Levarad. Shenamar Chachoykesh V'Zel Lechem Abel Limotz Mesher V'Nisuin. She'amrila Ki B'Hoyle Hoisim B'Hoitze Ba'amo. I'm going to explain in 1 second. I just want to finish the thought. Esa Kol Shena Amar V'Hashlichim Hira K'Zohar. So literally that the giving of the Torah was kind of like the engagements party. In other words, we began the process of betrothal, where God is saying, I am taking you. We chose us before we came into the world, but at that point in a revealed way, here's the Torah. Here's how we are going to build our relationship. And then when Mashiach comes, it will be revealed in the highest capacity. And then we will literally become in a state of oneness, true marriage. And this will take place in the days of Mashiach. And then the light of the sun will be like the light of the moon, will be like the light of the sun. And Yisrael will not only be like the moon that receives from the sun, but we will be like the sun. How many times has the Rebbe said it in the Sikha? And then it will be revealed how the Jewish people and God are truly one. That's some serious stuff right there. And this, of course, is revealed in the highest capacity in Yud Tes Kislev, the Torah of Chassidus. The Akri Mila V'Heshlim of Lavana, after the moon has already reached a state of fulfillment. Shemizemura V'Heshlemas Heshlemas Dahavana. Shemizkare Hahamali Ta'achad Imo Ima the US Komoisei Mamash or the Vanakahama. And after the moon has reached its state of fullness, and now that it's shrinking again, as we have been learning, that what is happening is only the light of the moon is shrinking, but the essence of the moon is getting closer to the essence of the sun, to the point that they will reach a state of oneness. But we see how much more so that Yud Tes Kislev fell out on the third day of the week, when God said doubled over Kitayv, when the sun and God created the two great luminaries. Excuse me. And then the goal, of course, is the B'tzias Echad, to reach a state of oneness. And we know when Moshiach comes that the moon, again, the Rebbe has said this point numerous times to drill it into our heads, will no longer be receiving a small like in itself, but it will become in the state of total oneness with the sun. And there will be a crown above both of them. Literally, the essence of God will rule over everything, physical, spiritual. It's like that now, but it will be in a revealed way. It's not revealed now. It's still concealed. Okay. Good. And this is connected, of course, to the Parsha of the week. Hold on, let me just do a time check. I think it's a pretty short sequel. We'll finish pretty early. 295, 316, 16, 5, 12, 1, 10, 5. Okay. Parsha V'yishlach. And then, of course, in Mincha time, we read Parshas V'yeshev. Echidesh b'avodas shel Yaakov b'parshiyos V'yishlach. V'yeshev. The Gabi avodas b'parshas V'yetz. The unique thing the Rebbe says of the service of Yaakov in this week's Parsha V'yishlach and Parshas V'yeshev we read in Mincha regarding the previous Parshas V'yetze and Toldos. Parshas V'yishlach V'yashav Gam V'gamar B'avodas B'roaring. Because the Rebbe said in these two Parshas we are completing the service of Birurim, of the rectification of Esau. Esau was rectified thousands of years ago. So what are we doing? That's a good question, right? And therefore we see Yaakov was already ready. Yaakov was ready to rock and roll. He said, all right, Esau's purified. It's time for Mashiach. How much more so in our days? Could you imagine? So what's going on? And Yaakov sent out angels to go before him to meet his brother. These angels were representative of the fact that he completed everything. It was showing the sign of completion. Everything was rectified. And everything was ready for the redemption. And this is what's going to happen, that God will judge Esau, and his rulership will be complete. And the Yeshev, next week's Parsha, that he should reach the state of peace, of resting. This is indicative of the ultimate dwelling that will take place in the days of Mashiach. And then we will have the ultimate redemption of our souls when Mashiach comes. And the Rebbe says the difference between our situation where Yaakov already did the work of rectification and already fixed everything up in a complete way, and everything was already ready for Mashiach. The Rebbe said this is the same idea of an example between the situation of the moon as it receives from the sun to the situation where they both become equal. Yaakov nimsa levana, and the Yaakov is likened to the moon. A ma'or hakatan, the small light. Yaakov nikra katan. Me, it said, and I grew small. Yom kiyom Yaakov katan hu. Nechem katan, muna the katan. Ha'alpizah yador shemiyot levana. And now we see this concept again of the diminishing of the moon. Whom mipnei shabirira sakedin de tohu. Nifal nitzatzer kedusha lamat. And this is indicative of the breaking of the vessels of the world of Tuhu. and the sparks that fell down into this world below, the holy sparks. And they all descended down into the lowest aspect of the sphere of Malchus, which is like the moon. And this is the job of the Makabel. And they descended through all the upper worlds down to this physical world of Asiya, in order for us to rectify these divine sparks of Tohu. And therefore we see the general work of the moon has been throughout all these generations to receive from the sun, because its service was biruring. So we needed the energy of the sun in order to do our work, to give us the power to rectify and lift up these sparks of godly energy that fell into the world. But once we finish this work of rectifying these godly energy that came down, and then the moon will no longer be the makabel, the receiver. But the light of the moon will then be equal to the light of the sun. In other words, we will not have our job of rectifying sparks anymore, because everything's done. And then these two great lights will shine to themselves. And we see this connected to this week's parsha when Yaakov Avinu sent out the angels before his brother Esav. And this is indicative of a level that's above from this. Because Esav, his brother, is sources from the world of Tohu or chaos. And the idea is for this great encompassing makif light of Tohu, that it fell down here below to be rectified by the inner light, which is connected to Yaakov. But the goal is that this high level of energy and the rectification of the vessels should reach a state of oneness. This is another example of this concept of the light of the sun and the light of the moon reaching a state of oneness again. And furthermore, to the point that the moon is no longer a receiver from the sun. Wow, the Rebbe is hammering this point home. It's a deep point. But rather, the light of the moon will then become just like one with the light of the sun, and they will become equal. Yud Aleph. And all of this is much more applicable to us in our generation than ever before. First of all, that even from the situation that now we know that Yaakov has completed all the rectification and refinement of the sparks of Tohu from Esav. Therefore, everything is ready for the redemption. Nevertheless, what's the problem? We don't see Moshiach. So something must be lacking still. After the multitude of work that we've been doing throughout all the generations, especially after the revealing of the Torah Chassidus on Yutes Kislev, and the spreading out of the well springs to the furthest corners of the world, and especially through the work of our Rebbes in every single generation, up into the leader of our generation, when we see for sure that Chassidus has been spread to the furthest corners of the globe, therefore, the Rebbe says we must announce we've completed all of the service. Common theme the Rebbe said again in the Sichos. And the buttons have been published. And everything is prepared for the days of Mashiach. From this, we can draw down to the service that comes after this amount, after what we've just talked about. We're no longer doing the work of rectifying or refining the world. Rather, the service now is specifically to reveal in actuality Mashiach's presence in the world. We're done fixing things up. We just got to reveal Mashiach's presence in the world. Yud base. Yesh Lamar, there is to say. Beit Yaakov Eish Ubeit Yosef Havi Esa Lakash. Yerusha Hanek Huhad Es the goats God at Surforts. The Yosh Es Rehav Anigvar. The Dam Shema Hearts Yonish Es okay Hidushim Shel Beit Yosef should be the rain. And so the Reb is bringing down the a pasuk from the Haftorah, and he's saying there's something that's special about the house of Yosef in our generation. The Gabi Hadorash Lefan is it called Dorash Shel Rabbeinu Hazaki regarding even previous generations, and the house of Yosef he's referring to in the Haftorah, but he's also connecting this to the Rebbe who he calls the leader of the generation, the previous Rebbe who was the leader of the generation, but now it's our Rebbe, but the Rebbe always talks about them being one continuation, his name being Yosef Yitzchak, that there's a higher service connected to now. Because now the well springs of Chassidus have been brought down to the furthest corners of the world, here in America, and also in France. At the time of the Alter Rebbe, when he was dealing with Napoleon in France, Hasidus wasn't revealed in France at the time. But it was only specifically in our generation through the house of Yosef, talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe, who began the process of spreading out shluchim. The truth is the Rebbe Rashab actually did, but it's just mamish a handful. Nasi Gilei Hafutz Gam Medina Sarfat B'Yisoy So Yeshivas Tamkei Tamimim Ad Levavitch. We see that now there's even the Frierdiker Rebbe established a Tamkei Tamim yeshiva, a Chabad yeshiva in France. Velochin Agia B'Fual Hazman Shirisha Es Eri Hanegev. Alan Yeshua Bahar Tzionish Baresa. Yes, well, he said that do Remez, and we see. I think this was the. There was a bunch of emissaries from France at the time in 770 that the Rebbe was giving the Sikha. So Tzarfat, or France, is the same gematria of 770. Vishleimus, the Mispar Sheva, the completion of the number 7. Kafish called Echad, Yechol Ma Eser. Kafish called Echad, Yechol Mimea. Right? 7 in tens and in hundreds. And this is showing how that Sarfat, France, has also been purified now. It wasn't purified in the times of the Alter Rebbe, but it is now from our Rebbe. The Rebbe said all the sparks and all the energy of France has already been lifted up, and France has already been rectified. By the way, I heard in a Hasidic Farbrengen one time from a big mashpia that's the reason why there's so much anti-Semitism in France, because there's nothing left for the Jewish people to do there. That from the times of the Frierdiker Rebbe and our Rebbe, they elevated all the sparks. When the Rebbe took the French national anthem and turned it into a Hasidic niggin, he killed the ministering angel of France. And I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying I heard this in a well, that is for sure true. But the concept of all the sparks that the Rebbe is saying now were taken out of France, but I did hear that that's the reason why there's so much anti-Semitism, because there's no purpose for a Jew to be there, right? That's why a Jew can't live in Egypt anymore, because when we left Egypt, we sucked all the divine energy, all the sparks out of Egypt, so there's no purpose in being there. Interesting concept. Here should be Rot Sarfat, 770, Nasai de Beit Yosef. The Rebbe is basically saying the Frierdiker Rebbe rectified France. The Beit Yosef Kishut Kapshuto. Abayit Shabo Bahar Va'ad Shekanahu Vazah Hayat Kodesh Mahar Nasi Dereno. The Esther Shanim Acharein V'Chaim V'Chaim V'Balmadin. And we know that the time spent there משם הלכה זה משחס עבורת בבית יוסף שמספר 7. בבית יוסף, but Yosef Peratza. Not only is Sarfat, France, the Gematria 770, but also Peratza. That means to spread out. It's talking about spreading out the well springs into France, in this lower half of the globe, America, where there's nothing lower than it. Yud Gimel. All right. With the Reino Gufa, Nitaisif, Oi, Joyce, Kana, and now we see also the fact of the moon being in a state of completion in the 15th of the month is especially applicable to our generations. You do it for some Rosh Hashanah Shana Ayat Shener Niflois. The year I will show you wonders. And wonders in everything. Hainu Shahashana Atzmai Bakal Hinim Shabo Haim Wayfenshaw Niflois. Pelesh Lamal Manis says that wonders are even higher from miracles. Niflois Leshan Rabim, and he says, I will show you wonders in a multitude. There'll be a lot of wondrous things. Ba'oi Niflois Nun Pelet. Velochein Nun Palot, meaning 50 wonders. And the main wonders I will show you is like when I took you out of Egypt, I will once again show you wonders. It's a pasuk the Rebbe quotes often, connected to the Gula Amitis Shlema from the prophet Micah. And in this year we find ourselves already after the completion of the moon in the third month. And we're approaching very rapidly the Torah of the Rosh Hashanah of the Torah of Hasidus. And this is the beginning process of revealing the Torah of Mashiach. And then the moon and the sun will return both to a state of oneness. And we also see the day approaching rapidly of the wedding day of the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter to our Rebbe, which was in Yud Dalet Kislev. A lot going on in the month of Kislev. The Rushim and Torah's Chassidus. It's a connection because Chassidus is likened to a wedding because it's like a foretaste of Mashiach. Is what we just said. And a foretaste of the Torah that will come out from God. And therefore the Rebbe says, in our days, the only thing that is left is for us to open up our eyes. Before mamash, and open our eyes to see in this the reality and actuality. And the fact that the Rebbe is saying already that we are literally one with Hashem. The Jewish people and God are truly one. And we're sitting at the Shulchan Aruch at the table of our fathers. The Sudas and the series at the festival of the wedding. Sasura, the Vayatan, B'Shora Bar, Bayan, Mishmor. And the guarded wine in the Shora Bar and the Leviathan. It says God will ask David Melech to bench. She said, will lift up his cup and he was benched. Yudal, Masihu Iker. And the main thing is the action. And we're sitting on Erev Shabbos on the 15th of the month when the moon is complete. Shachas Bechinas Erev Yutes Kislev. And then 3 days will be Erev Yutes Kislev. Halachos Kamavakam Yemei Hageula Yutes Kislev. How much more so on Yutes Kislev itself? Shachim B'Yamim Shla'achar Ze'ali Yemei Hanuch. And after that we'll carry on to the days of Hanukkah. Yesh La'orech V'Yidvadu Chasidus. And we must increase in Chasidic forbearance. B'Kol Makoyin. First of all, B'Kol Medina. In every single place, in every single city. In every single community, in every single neighborhood. This is very, very important point. The Rebbe said, and don't just focus on the big farengas. But in the main part of the city. And then but in the simple places as well. And the main thing the Rebbe says is we must have these little individual farbrengens as well. In other words, sometimes, the community, it's very nice. They get together and they say, we're making one big farbrengen. And it's instead of a farbrengen, it becomes a big speech, and it's not a farbrengen. It's a speech. Farbrengen is a farbrengen. So the Rebbe is saying it's okay to have those big things, but don't discourage the smaller communities and littler groups from just being like, nah, let's just, we don't want to do it for farbrengen. We only have a few people. The Rebbe said to concentrate on these little farbrengens too, that every farbrengen is precious. Don't just focus on the big, big gatherings. Rebbe said, how much more so? We must increase in these small farbrengens. And it's not necessary to go to these big gatherings in order to have a farbrengen. Nevertheless, we should do private ones as well. And this is, if you take away, there's a lot to take away from the Sikha. But the Rebbe leaves us with a very powerful paragraph, and it's something that I've repeated countless times in farbrengens because I think it's huge. Okay, hold on to your horses. It's necessary for every single one of us to have 3 farbrengens. Im atzmo v'kol eser koiches nafsho. Such a beautiful words. The first farbrengen is with ourself, with our 10 soul powers. How often do you farbrengen with yourself? How often do you sit down and do deep contemplations and think about what a putz you are, and think about how much work you need to do, and think about what we say, how we act, how we conduct ourselves, our lives, what's wrong, what's missing, what do we need to improve? Don't become like these superficial Americans, how everything's fine. It's great. Everything is good. And they're shallow. Yes, Baruch Hashem, everything is good. But we have to work on ourselves all the time. And it's very easy just to say, I'm fine, and just discount it and not go inside. And the Rebbe is saying now your first farbrengen needs to be with yourself. You need to go deep. You need to look and see yourself, how you're acting, how you're behaving. How's your Judaism? How's your menschlichkeit? How are you doing with your wife? How are you doing with your family? How are you doing at your work? How are you doing in your neighborhood? Dig inside yourself. Second farbrengen, with the members of your household. How many times you sit down and farbrengen? With your wife, with your family, with the people of your own home. Very important. I do it with my wife weekly. It's so important. I do it with my kids. Maybe not weekly, but close to. We got to sit down. And for every Hasidic holiday, we sit down with my family, and we have a farbrengen. Maybe short. We say l'chaim. Everyone says a few words. You have to farbrengen with yourself. You have to bring with your home. And the third farbrengen is with your friends and all the people within your circle of influence that you could reach. All and the fathers give their hearts to the sons, and the sons to their fathers. Powerful. 3 farbrengens. Always starts with yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've got to deal with people who not have some nice way to say it, and I interact with people that are so busy saving the world, and they're broken. Their families are broken. And they're doing wonderful things out in the world. I have a big saying, anyone who's been in my office, in my home office, it's a saying the Rebbe says, not so common, but and I have it printed in big Asya script, and like the Torah, it says, Manucha simcha v'tuv lavav. Menucha is peace. If you don't have inner peace, you've got nothing. I don't care what your house looks like, your wife looks like, your car looks like, what you have in the bank. If you're not at peace and you can't be by yourself without a phone, without a radio, without a TV, just sitting in quiet with a smile on your face, happy in your own skin, you've got nothing. You have to have peace. And then it's simple. And then you could have joy. You can't be happy if you don't have peace. If you're suffering mentally, emotionally, physically, how are you going to be happy? You can't. It doesn't work, right? Have you ever had like a back pain or a shoulder pain, like you're like, or you're sick, you're walking around like you're like, you don't say to someone like, why are you not smiling? You can't be happy if you don't have peace inside. And then after that, tu lavav, you have a joyful, happy heart, and now you can really influence people around. You can really go into this mode of connecting and helping others, but it has to start with yourself. And in these forbearance, you must arouse you, yourself, and those around you to increase in your three general lines: Torah, tefillah, and good deeds. As we know, according to the pasuk Parav Shalom Nafshi, it says, God says to all of those, that's the full pasuk, to all of those who pray together with the community and learn Torah, it is considered as if you redeemed my soul. Not just ki'ilu, so to speak, but actual redemption. But pashtus should take off midad mamish, and the main thing is that all this should come into actuality, like for real. It's kiyamim bekeshes Yaakov, as like the request of Yaakov, the Yishev B'Shavat, to dwell in peace. Before the Gilui, should come to actual reality. The Yeshua Yeshayim Espenech, the Beis Hamikdash Lishim, we will all go to the third Beis Hamikdash, Rishim Ta'arech Lidvadur Gadol, and we'll have the big forbringer with Hanukkah and the Beis Hamikdash. The inauguration of the third temple, and all the Jewish people will be there together, and it will be happening. The Rabbi says even before Hanukkah, and in the days of Hanukkah will be even more Shleimus Geula, complete redemption. We will go from strength to strength. And we will see God return to Tzion. God bless you. You should live Geula, think Geula, see Geula, speak Geula, hear Geula, and radiate and teach and influence Geula. Moshiach now.